Thank you. Thank you, Carlos, for the introduction. So I work for a think tank in Latvia. It is a think tank that was established about 15, 17 years ago as a response to the need of evidence-based policy-making push. So whatever Carlos mentioned before, the need to provide the data for policymakers. And that was along with the development of institutions and our road to accessing the European Union. We work with various issues from good governance to anti-corruption to public parties financing and so on. And I work in the fields of migration and integration. And experience on a daily basis the lack of information, the low level of awareness on these issues. This is why we at PROVIDUS have started several projects that not only deal now with policy analysis and analysis of data and so on, but also try to bring our knowledge to classrooms, to teachers and so on. So we're kind of spreading the activity and seeing how we can make the learning process on migration and integration processes more informed. I'm not going to talk too much about the rise of populism today. We know it's there. I'm also not going to talk too much about the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe, because we also see it's there, and maybe the sentiment has always been there, but the way that it is now expressed and uncovered in public is probably becoming more prominent. I will also not talk too much about protests and clashes in Europe. What I want to try to do today is understand why. And I will try in this presentation to explain why we at PROVIDUS think it is important to work more also in the education and information an awareness raising sphere based on several sources of recent data, Pew Research, Eurobarometer, and also a study done by NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence. Maybe seems weird why I speak of NATO now, but we'll see in a little bit. So first, some steps to set the kind of state of play. First, Europe is a diverse place. It is a fact, and it was a fact before the 2015 asylum situation. It will continue to be a fact. But and we can see, from this data, there are, 87 indigenous peoples of Europe. This is not talking about immigrant populations that have arrived in the more recent years. This is talking about the composition of population in Europe besides the nation states. There are several types of minorities in Europe: national, transnational, immigrant, and indigenous. And the countries with largest minority populations are Latvia, number one there, which is something that probably a lot of people don't usually think, Spain, Luxembourg, and the UK. But the thing is that not all European citizens, or not all people in Europe that believe that diversity is something that characterizes Europe, that diversity is something that is a fundamental characteristic or representation of the European Union. But as we saw from the previous slide, it is. The views on minorities are also increasingly negative. Less and less people think that diversity is something that makes their country a better place to live. And of course, there are geographical differences about this across Europe. But we can see that, most of the people are indifferent. This is the first table. And the yellow part is, here are the part of the population that believe that diversity is something that makes their country a worse place to live. And the top three countries are Greece, Italy, and Hungary, and then Poland, who say, well, actually, diversity doesn't help us at all. The places where diversity is perceived as something positive: Sweden, the UK, Spain. And also, more and more certain types of minorities receive a more negative kind of attitude and views towards them than others. So Muslims being the prime example. In many countries in particular, we see that the differences between migrants from other European member states and from third countries are perceived very differently. So this is the case of Latvia, where the dark columns are the ones that say, well, we're fine with immigration from mobility from other European Union member states. And the gray ones say what the opinion is of immigrants from third countries. So very much, so about 80% of people in Latvia think that immigration from third countries is undesirable. And this statistic has remained the same since the reinstation of our independence for the past 25 years. This doesn't really change. The attitude towards immigrants from other member states is improving. But if we look at the EU in average, of course the view is more balanced, but we also see that, you know, about 50%, 55% of the average EU population doesn't believe that immigration from third countries is something beneficial. Why is that so? Where does the notion that there are some more desirable migrant populations and some less desirable? We're not talking about skills here. This is, of course, dealing with the perception we have of certain types of immigrants. Immigrants from the EU, maybe they're more similar to us, maybe, you know, they're more kind of in the expat flank, not the low-skilled labor force flank, and then from third countries it would be those who are less skilled. And actually, if we would look at the data, it isn't really so, but it is more the perception that is created. So these opinions are associated with the perceived opportunities and threats. And here, so we look at how people perceive migration. Is it a problem? Is it an opportunity? Is it both? Or is it neither? And almost 30% of Latvians think this is only a problem, even though, as we'll see later, most of Latvians don't even know if there are migrants in our country or not. But we perceive it as a problem. Or more than 40%, it's around 30% in Lithuania. But as we see on average in the EU, we see it both as a problem and an opportunity, or neither. I think the problem arises from only seeing it as a problem, because of course there are challenges associated with immigration. We can't deny them, but if we also don't see any opportunity along with the challenges, then this is where the problem arises. So why is it so? These are the parts of the dimensions of opportunities that we see. And I kind of added here to the average EU, to Latvia, Lithuania, also the kind of extremes. Sweden is the top one, the light blue one, and then Bulgaria is the top dark blue one. And EU average is yellow. Lithuania is actually quite an average country regarding these data on the EU level. Sweden is, of course, way ahead in seeing the positive dimensions, where we see that, you know, around between 70 and 90%, they think, immigration boosts innovation and brings new ideas. It has a positive impact on national economy. It enriches national cultural life, fills jobs where we can't really find workers for. But then in countries like Bulgaria, and also quite a lot Latvia, we don't really see these positive dimensions. I explained this in Latvia with the so-called invisible immigration, because most of our immigration is from neighboring countries, from the Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, so it's people who look like us and speak in a language we hear on the street on a daily basis anyway. But then if we look at the problems, and immigration constitutes about 4% of the whole population of Latvia, then we look at the problematic dimensions that people see. First, take away jobs. Almost 40% of Latvians think immigrants take away jobs. Actually, we don't have enough workers at the moment, so this doesn't really materialize. That it worsens crime, and this is actually the crime aspect, and the burden on welfare system is something that exists in all member states. Around 50% of the EU population thinks that migration worsens crime. It's not specified here whether it's crime committed by migrants or towards migrants, because both exist and both have increased, especially after the 2015 situation. But the burden on welfare system, I mean, as I said, in Latvia, the immigrant population is 4%, and they're all there because of work or studies, and aren't actually entitled to any welfare benefits for most of the time they're there. But somewhere they have gotten the impression that they create a burden on the welfare system. So how do, the question is, where do people get inspired for this? And I think the next two slides will give you a little bit of an impression. Did I turn off the light?
I don't know. Did you push a button?
I don't know. I didn't push any buttons. Okay. Okay, so what I wanted to tell you now, and this is maybe a complicated graph anyway, too much information, what I wanted to say is that actually only in 5 countries are people, around 50% of the population thinks that they are well informed about immigration. In EU, on average, only 1/3 of the people think they're well informed. In countries like Latvia, 72% say that they're not really informed about immigration and integration related matters. Same in Lithuania. So if 2/3 and more of the EU population doesn't feel that they are well informed about immigration, and yet the same amount of people say that immigration creates more problems than opportunities, and they're more sure that the problems are more persistent than the opportunities, the issue is how first, how do we speak with a population like this about immigration and integration? How do policymakers speak about it? And what their vulnerability is regarding the information that is being fed to them. There was another slide that says, that shows the question was, to your knowledge, what is the proportion of immigrants in the total population of your country? The darker blue one is the actual population, and the light blue one is the number people think. So, and in Latvia it isn't entirely correct, but because it includes non-citizens, and in the Latvian context we don't really call the non-citizen population, you know, the specific legal status that Latvia and Estonia has in immigration. So I already said in Latvia it's about 4%. So Latvians think there are 25% of our country are immigrants, but the actual number is 4. Similar proportions in other countries, in Italy, in Portugal, in the UK. Because first, there's not a clear distinction between mobile EU citizens and immigrants from third countries, but also because there's a certain type of information, an image present in the media. And with this data from Eurobarometer, when they ran it across different demographics and the feeling of how well informed they are or not, the link was actually, it wasn't that people who were well informed with various types of media, that, they had a more kind of balanced view. No, those who felt more informed, well informed, they were mostly positive and saw also dimensions of opportunity. And those who didn't feel well informed or who felt misinformed or even lied to, they were mostly negative. And I think these two last points is where we then see the link between the dimensions of education and the type of opinion present in the society. I'm not saying that there are only positive aspects to migration, but I'm saying that there probably are opportunity dimensions. And why this is also risky is because the more negative people feel, the more easy it is to kind of push the society towards disbalance, we then threaten societal cohesion and interpersonal relations in the society in general. On the EU level, there is an increasing emphasis on security. So let's strengthen borders, let's externalize this, cooperate with neighboring states, create, disembarkation centers there. But they're not really addressing the internal security and societal cohesion aspects. And if they're not addressing these, but they're bringing all the discourse on migration to the kind of border and external aspects, then one, either we leave the discourse on internal security and societal cohesion on the shoulders of member states, of individual member states, or we allow other information creators, misinformers, fake news creators to create a certain discourse on migration and thus also shape the politics and the societal cohesion in certain countries. So the question is do national governments have enough sources to assess this? And the NATO Strategic Communication Center of Excellence is located in Riga but operates in the larger Nordic Baltic area. They did a survey on outside footprints on the information environment. They looked at the narratives promoted by Russia in the Nordic Baltic region. We don't have to pretend that there isn't a certain politically motivated meddling with information in various countries. If it happened in the greatest country in the world, it can happen also in the Baltics. But so what they observed in certain media outlets is that there were campaigns developed and implemented over a longer time period to promote certain discourses. And these are three of the discourses that I'll mention here. It dealt also more with like military and political issues, but these were the three ones that I thought would be interesting in the context of this presentation. First, they promoted the discourse of refugees and immigrants as a destabilizing factor. And it became stronger after the migrant crisis in 2015. They said, that openness of certain countries led to more crime, and that is because of their soft liberal values, and that weakened societies. So this was a discourse that was promoted not only in the Baltic states, but also in Sweden, in Finland, in Norway, and also afterwards when they did surveys to see how much do the society members, the public actually agree with this, almost half of the Swedish population also went along with this discourse. They also tried to promote the discourse of rise of far-right nationalists. Here, they spoke about migration as something positive, but the reaction to it as negative. So also to kind of create a discord in the society. In the first case, they played more to the underlying sentiment of anti-immigration issues, and in the second one, to those more probably pro-migration. And then regarding discrimination against minorities, there the focus was more in the Baltics and the Russian-speaking populations, but not only. This discourse was also present in Sweden, and so these were the ones that were used in Sweden. Also, radical Islam is a destabilizing factor, or European Union unity is diminishing because of the refugee crisis or other aspects. So, what does this mean? And this is the food for thought for the longer run today. First, who shapes the opinion? And my answer to this, my last two sentences, is that when a national state bargains about and also sensationalizes migration, it actually feeds into this discourse of negativity, threat, insecurity, instability, of something that might not actually be true if we looked at the actual data of, for example, crime rates or attacks. As migration is a fact, and as it is something that will continue to take place, the state will have to deal with the consequences of it, and also of the narrative someone else or itself enforced. The control of migration is good and is needed, but you have to explain to the population about the ways you control this, to create legal pathways of migration, and then to inform the public about the opportunities that this brings. So for example, in the context of Latvia, we will need labor force from abroad because return migration isn't nearly as quick. So we will have to do it, and we can't just put the blame on employers as saying they are the bad ones who bring foreigners. The state actually has to say why this is needed. And then to think about the things that we teach in schools, look at media literacy, digital skills, and competence-based education, where tolerance, intercultural communication, and so on are basic concepts, and then see how we speak about migration and integration in these contexts. So I'll stop here, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to.
Thank you very much. Yes, the floor is open. Please raise your hand and you'll get the microphone. We have around 5 minutes for them.
Thank you very much. I'm representing trade unions here in Lithuania, and I would like to ask you about the Bulgarian phenomenon. They are so against migration, even knowing that so many people from Bulgaria, they are mobile workers who are trying to find somewhere else. So what are the reasons? And the second question is, maybe I will stay. I'm sorry. Yeah. And the second question, what do you think about coming elections to the European Parliament, where the question on the migration will be the key issue for the results? Thank you so much.
So with Bulgaria, and actually Latvia and Lithuania, I think as well, the paradox is the same. A lot of people have left. About 15% of the Latvian citizenry is now outside of Latvia. And dual citizenship is okay for those who left, but not for those who arrived from other countries, for example. And this, I think, first it deals a lot with the narratives that are there, the ones that I described. But the other aspect that it deals with is what is the basis of integration, of the integration program, and what has been the dominant outlook on how foreigners should or shouldn't behave when they arrive in the country. And in Latvia, for example, the emphasis has been very much so on Latvianness, on them learning the language, the culture, and so on. But also, if you look in the Eurobarometer data, in all of these countries where attitude towards immigration is more negative, they think integration is very important, and they support really strengthening language, tuition, social orientation, and so on. But as soon as you move on to more civic and political dimensions of integration, none of them believe that they should have the right to participate in the society. So basically, they view newcomers as someone who should respect, the culture that they arrive in, but not give them any possibility to actually participate and represent their interests. And the other question was about?
European Parliament?
The European Parliament. Okay, so the European Parliament surprised me whenever they had the debate on the Hungarian case now and the Stop Soros law, because we see that in the European Parliament we hear more and more anti-immigration sentiment in very nasty terms, in very xenophobic and racist terms as well. This isn't only about, whoever people elected and they should have the right to choose the policy that they chose, but is very much about blaming the migrant populations now for the discord in the European Union, calling them names, blaming them for all the terrible things that happen in a respective country. In the next week's European Union Council meeting of Prime Ministers, migration and internal security will be the #1 topic straight after the Brexit dinner. And they have no solutions. They still have no solutions. It's only a discussion about what some states might be willing to do. I don't know how this is going to unfold. I think we're going to continue strengthening borders, but a lot of member states, including Bulgaria and Latvia, will have to face their labor market and economic needs and decide how to go about this. Yeah.